Hello, welcome to my live stream. I'm going to be doing a chat about Donald Trump. He's my current topic of the day. And as he's obviously a very person in the forefront, for lack of a better way of saying that, he's somebody I'd actually like to have a conversation about. But I've been doing a couple of live streams about him lately, and I just realized my last one, I actually had myself muted, so that one actually is not going to be even visible, or there's no sound on it, obviously, so you won't even be able to see what's going on, so I made a mistake there. But I'm going to continue with that. I'm going to continue talking about Donald Trump. And I'm going to continue talking in the same context I actually talked about the last time, which is basically characteristics and origin, why Trump is Trump. I'd really like to learn and know more about that. I'm going to continue with that today, and I'm going to continue using ChatGPT because it's the most intelligent chat AI engine out there. I'm not promoting them, no, just making a statement. And I'm just going to go over and ask general statements about him on ChatGPT, nothing specific about, generation of comments from ChatGPT that would be very specific. These are very generalized comments or questions that I should get a very generalized response from. Before I get started into that conversation, I would really like to have people join my channel. I am trying to get my channel up to the required requirements that is specified on YouTube, which is 1,000 subscribers, and I believe it's either 3,000 or 4,000 hours watch time. So a lot of watch hours are also required. So if you could join my channel and watch my content, that would be fantastic. So let's continue. I don't have anybody who's joined me so far, even though I've been trying to coax and convince people to join and letting them know what URL to join at. In fact, before I go into that, let's just see that I've got the right channel. Yeah, that's the right channel, N05. Okay, sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure everything is okay. Okay, so my channel is up and running, and nobody has joined me yet. So, looks like it might be a conversation I'm going to have to myself. Anyways, let's start. So my question I put up on ChatGPT is, which influence had the greatest psychological impact on Donald Trump, obviously? And the short answer is Fred Trump. His father had the greatest psychological impact by a wide margin. I've heard about that, and I was also wondering about the aspects of some other people who were a part of his life, and I had the feeling they actually were very, very influential. But ChatGPT says not. Got to remember, this is an AI engine. It responds basically on what it thinks you want to hear, and not so much based on actual concrete, information provided by the scientists or people who evaluate. So that's a general statement. I do, though, believe his father actually had a very big impact on his life. And they say here, everything else, Roy Cohn, he had a big impact, I felt. Media, politics, TV, amplified or refined traits that were already formed by Fred Trump. And that probably is somewhat correct. Below is a clear evidence-based explanation of why. Okay, they say ChatGPT says this is evidence. It's going to provide evidence? I don't know. The single greatest psychological influence on Donald Trump, Fred Trump. Why the father matters more than anything else. In psychology, the primary caregiver, especially the dominant parent, shapes self-worth, coping mechanisms, view of authority, definition of success, fear responses, emotional defense. I think that's true, and I do think from what I understand about Fred Trump and his very dominant character, I could see that being very influential on anybody in his family. The previous conversation I had, that I actually muted, I talked about these same type of things, and I think it's Ted Trump, I think is his brother's name, his older brother, who died from alcohol influences. He was an alcoholic. And it's interesting aspect of saying that these are very, pointed out aspects of, a characteristic that could be influential. And in that light, influential if the person who's being influenced technically can accept it. And Donald Trump's older brother couldn't accept that. His father was very hard on his older brother. His older brother wasn't interested in what the family was doing, which obviously is real estate. He had no interest in that. I think probably a lot of it got to do with the aspect of he really had a difficult time with his father and couldn't handle him, couldn't take him. And he became a pilot. And it's interesting because my previous review indicates the fact that his father was unimpressed with the aspect of his son becoming a pilot. I could say the same thing about a real estate person. I don't see, anything in that deems aspects of grandioseness or, something that's up there above everything else. It's not. You deal in building buildings. What's fantastic about that, and if anybody knows anything about, especially about commercial pilots, you find out that's a lot of work to get that level of an endorsement, to get that level of training. To become a commercial pilot, his brother was a commercial pilot. That takes a lot. And to be demonized and put down because of it, you can understand, if you went through something like that, how that could be probably very detrimental. Saying, this is what I'm looking for in my life. This is things that interest me, and my father's telling me this is worthless, that I'm useless, and all those type of things. And that's interesting. And you can see that Donald Trump obviously had everything that his father wanted to have. I also said in my previous video, which again you can't hear because it's muted, but the aspect of his father being very difficult on his brother and causing, basically, you could say his father caused his brother's death. You say that about your parent, to do something like that to a child. That to me, that's mind-boggling that a parent would do that to a child. Now, he didn't kill him, obviously, but his toughness on him was too much, and he couldn't take it. It's a consequence. And the interesting thing is, the early stuff that I heard about Donald Trump, I didn't really know much about Donald Trump. I knew about him and that kind of stuff, but I really didn't know much about him. Other people I talked to said they knew about him his whole life, and they said he really wasn't anything different than what he is now. But the things I heard about is he actually took his brother's death quite strongly, for lack of a better way of saying that. Apparently, it impacted him a lot. And the fact is, he doesn't drink. That's a big thing. People say, well, Donald Trump doesn't drink, but, you wonder why. That's why. His brother was an alcoholic. His brother died because of it. He saw what happened to somebody who went through that. And you could sit there and say, of all the stuff you could say about Donald Trump, you could say, at least he was intelligent enough to sit there and say to himself, maybe that's something I should not get involved with. Because look what it can do. Look what it did to my brother. Oh yeah, there it is. What Fred Trump taught Donald Trump explicitly and implicitly. Okay. I didn't read the second part of this answer, but ChatGPT is going to talk about it too. This is his brother. Love was conditional. Yeah, well, if it was there at all, but the whole thing is, there's points to that. Affection and approval were tied to winning, strength, success, obedience, and dominance. Again, these are all characteristics of his father. And I think they're just trying to give an initiation, or ChatGPT is getting an initiation of where this went awry with respect to Fred Trump. This creates performance-based self-esteem where if I lose, I'm worthless. I think that's probably something his brother felt out a lot because apparently his father said that directly. It wasn't the fact that he lost. Technically, everything that he did, he somewhat succeeded. He became a pilot, so you could say he succeeded at that. But again, from his father's perspective, that was completely worthless. To him, he was a loser. And from what I understand, he said that to him directly. This single dynamic explains Trump's inability to admit loss, his obsession with winning, his sensitivity to criticism. Okay. This really has nothing to do explicitly with his brother, except for the fact that he could see what the consequences are with respect to these scenarios that probably occurred in his family. His father never accepted loss, and he learned that from, how his father treated his brother. His obsession with winning, well, technically, he really didn't need to see anything from his brother from that. He could see that directly from his father. His sensitivity to criticism. I don't know much about his father and how he handled criticism. I heard that he didn't like it, but again, nobody really likes to be criticized. But Donald Trump dislikes criticism extensively. Weakness is dangerous. This is a big thing. Fred openly mocked people he viewed as weak. Donald learned early, vulnerability invites punishment, admitting fault invites humiliation, strength must be displayed, not just possessed. This explains constant projection of confidence, overstatements of success, yes, hostility toward critics. And you can see that. You can just see the way Donald Trump behaves. You can see this a lot. Even those aspects of never admitting fault, which is not here, and not something that really is something that I see with respect to his father, but with respect to with what's Roy Cohn. Yeah, Roy Cohn, who was Donald Trump's personal private lawyer at the beginning. He died, during the 80s. And such, but apparently that guy had a lot of to do with the aspects of never. You can see that some of the comments I hear never admit failure, but never admit you're wrong. Which Fred Cohn or Mr. Cohn, apparently he got that heavily from him too. Which I would say that's a big influence. Donald Trump internalized: if you push hard enough, you win. This is why Trump attacks rather than retreats. He doubles down instead of correcting. He sees compromise as weakness. Some people will say these are all very strong, positive traits of a person, but with respect to how you see Donald Trump handles this, you can see that it's actually pretty tough in how he handles and puts out towards other people. Loyalty is absolute. Fred valued loyalty above ethics or nuance. Donald absorbed. Loyalty is personal, not institutional. Betrayal is unforgivable, which you can see that in with respect to his political activity. You can see that comes out quite a lot. Critics are enemies. This worldview dominates Trump's leadership style more than any other trait. Yeah, maybe. Why Roy Cohn was not the primary influence? Okay, this is a good point. Roy Cohn is often cited as Trump's biggest mentor, and I would say that that's what I've seen too. But psychologically, it looks like ChatGPT is trying to get into psychology here. Cohn did not create Trump's personality. That is a question mark there. He weaponized traits already present. I could see that that's true. He gave Trump tactics, not motivations. Probably. Cohn taught how to attack, which you could say the second one, how to deny. And that was big with Cohn. How to deny and never admit falsehoods. Always present yourself in a truthful line of sight. And Kahn taught him that heavily. He was big on that. How to manipulate the media, probably Kahn had a lot to do with that, yes. But those tactics worked because Trump already feared weakness, yes. Needed dominance, probably. Could not tolerate humiliation. I'm not a psychologist, so I really don't know exactly how those are something that were already there and just reinforced, or if it was something that was built. I really don't know. Kahn refined the defense system. Fred built it. Okay, I would say that that's the case. But I said the big thing that I've understood and heard about and seen documentaries on, that Kahn had taught Donald Trump to not admit, I was going to say not admit failure, but he basically learned that in general from his father. That aspect of never indicating he did anything wrong, anything that was or perceived as false or untrue. Kahn was really, really big on that. Military school, well, rewards aggression, probably, validates dominance, yes, reinforced hierarchy. I'm not really sure about that, per se, but it did not create. The psychological drive is simply confirmed lessons already taught at home. Okay. The psychological chain, cause and effect. Fred Trump, ego structure, behavior. Conditional approval, fear of weakness, aggressive defense mechanism, obsessive with winning, image over introspection, loyalty over truth, conflict as identity. Everything Trump became later is traceable to this chain. Yeah, like I said, Kahn, there was a lot of stuff that actually didn't come into here. Some of the things that Kahn taught him weren't part of this. Again, these are, you can see that these are very strong. Now, the thing is, did he learn more from his father, or were the things that stand out, Kahn-based, even though maybe it wasn't as all-encompassing as his father, maybe it was very prominent, regardless of the fact that it's not being more than everything else. The one trait that explains nearly everything. If you had to choose one psychological impact from Fred Trump, it is this. Trump learned that losing equals humiliation, and humiliation must be avoided at all costs. Yes, you can see that in Donald Trump. This explains denial of defeat. Yeah. Now, I would sit there and say, that's not really saying that you're not wrong as much as you weren't won over, and I say you can get that from his father. Attacking critics, yes, got that from his father. Narrative control to some extent. Grandiosity, yes. Refusal to apologize, yes. Projection, somewhat. Rage at perceived disloyalty, yes. Yeah, these are all things, I could say these are all things that are very much something that came from his father. But like I said, that aspect of not ever admitting anything untrue, anything that's false. Donald Trump never presents himself that way. He presents himself in a way that this is the truth. Regardless of any of the factual evidence behind it, he presents himself that way. Now, maybe he learned a little bit from his father, but I've never heard about his father being in that kind of mindset. And all the other stuff, absolutely 100%. I heard those about his father 100%. But the thing about the truthfulness, to me, that's more Kahn. And the thing is, and how strong is that? You can see that he uses that a lot in his interactions. Counterfactual insight. If Donald Trump had a father who valued emotional regulation, encouraged vulnerability, reward honesty over dominance, yeah, he likely would still have been wealthy, successful, ambitious. I guess that's all who you would talk to about that. But not combative, polarizing, obsessed with loyalty, hostile to criticism. The scale of his dominance-driven personality is his father's legacy. Yeah, I could say that probably he'd be a more normal person in that light. Final verdict. Greatest psychological impact, Fred Trump, architect of Trump's ego, source of his fear of weakness, root of his need for dominance, foundation of his conflict-based worldview. All other influences are merely stacked on top of that in foundation. And I'm not a psychologist, so I cannot make any comments about the psychological interpretations of these statements. I would say that his father had a big impact on him, but did anybody else have a big impact on him? I think Mr. Khan, I think he did. And like I said, I saw a movie about him, documentaries about him, and those movies, they presented Mr. Khan being extremely influential on Donald Trump at the beginning. At the end, they somewhat had a little bit of a moving apart to some extent, but I think Donald Trump had learned everything about what he acquired from Mr. Khan before that anyways. But I think Mr. Khan, I think he had more influence on Donald Trump than what this ChatGPT document is trying to present. But again, ChatGPT is not an intelligent person. It's basically just a generation of information that it was able to retrieve. And again, a lot's got to do based on the aspects of how it's interpreting the question being asked. And I'm thinking it probably was thinking, I'm thinking about, the interaction with his father being strong with respect to the type of question being asked, is why I'm thinking the ChatGPT stated the fact his father is the strongest influence, which, again, I agree he was, but I would not say 100% above everything else. If you want, I can compare Fred Trump's influence. I may get on that letter, and I think I'm okay with that. I'm going at these pretty much one shot at a time here. I see that nobody joined my live stream. I really wanted people to join, and nobody's joining at all. I don't know. I got to figure out a way how to convince people to join my live streams. I don't know how people do it. I'm trying to get people to join and chat about this. Anyways, this is pretty much the end of this particular part. For me, it's interesting to see why somebody is the way they are. What drove them to be what you perceive them being? And you can see that with respect to Donald Trump, he's an effect of his environment, his family, his father. You can see that. He is who he is because of where he comes from. Now, I'm not trying to say that that's a answer and an explanation that validates why he is. I don't 100 at all represent that. The aspect is he is who he is, and he does what he does, and he gets away with what he gets away with, which, in light, people with that kind of money, they get away with a lot of stuff. So it's one thing being very dominant in his character, but being dominant and having the availability of the money that he has availability to, that makes things, for me, worse. That makes things a lot worse. Yeah. Okay. I don't really have anything more to say about this. If you do view this video and you like what you hear about the aspect of why Trump is, I would say that probably a lot of people who follow Trump, his advocates, people who they follow Trump because of anything in the United States. He's a conservative politician now. Apparently he was a Democrat at the beginning, but he's a conservative now. And in the United States, there's a lot of my team mentality, especially in politics. And the aspect is, if Donald Trump does what he does, that's okay. He's my guy. And I've heard people who are advocates, who are conservatives in the United States, who say that. He's the right guy. He's a conservative. I'd like to have a talk about people about that too. There's all kinds of secondary conversations just talking about Donald Trump that you can have. And I'd really like to have that. So in my continuation of these talks about Mr. Trump, I would like to do that. I'm going to try and see if I can get people to join my chat, because that's what I'm trying to do. And until then, I will say goodbye. And become a member of my channel and watch my videos. Thank you.